Nate from California, who believes that if Jesus did exist, we got his or her gender wrong. Nate, talk us through it.
Hey, the name's Nate. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the name, my friend. What was it? Could you mind telling me what your name? Sorry, because when I called in, I didn't get a chance to look at the show first. My bad.
No, it's okay. I'm Richard, and I am joined today by Jamie, the blind Limey.
Yep. Hey, Nate.
Hey, hey, Richard and Jay. Is it okay if I just call you Jay? Or so?
Whatever you like, mate.
I have is I'm doing all right, thank you. So the argument I had was I was wondering, right? Now I myself am an agnostic. Your call to your must have perhaps told you that, right? But then I don't want to be so arrogant as to assert the non-existence of God. I want to give some benefit of doubt to the faiths per se, right? So in this case, let us take Christianity and Jesus as a fable, if I may call it a fable, goes, was born of a virgin, right? Which means I take it to mean that she conceived without sexual contact with another human being, or Joseph, or whoever it was, right? But then we also know on the side that there are several other animals in the animal kingdom, right? Such as Komodo dragons, for instance, right? Certain species of python, or even the white eagle or the great white shark, right? Which are not so far separated from us genetically. We all form a tree, we know that, evolutionarily speaking. So they all can reproduce asexually, right? And so let us say that Mother Mary was the only documented case of parthenogenesis in the humankind. Now I'm talking of possible, impossible, not likely, unlikely, right? So is it possible that she is the only case of parthenogenesis, which is asexual reproduction? Yeah. That probably was the only case documented in history. And so if that's the case, then here's the problem, right? If we looked at all the other animals who reproduce asexually, then their progeny are precise, or as precise can be, clones of their parent. So if you had a great white reproduce asexually in a tank with no contact with the male shark, her babies are going to be exact replicas of her, right? So in this,
I mean, we understand the concept of parthenogenesis, and yes, I am following you that if Mary did, it was in fact parthenogenesis, only her own genetic material will be used, and of course the gender is the only way to have a male baby in that is to have a male. It's the spermatozoa that determines the gender. So only female chromosomes would be available. So, and therefore Jesus is biologically female. Am I getting the idea basically? Okay. Fair enough. It's the whole, like, isn't it interesting that all of Santa's reindeer are female because they all have antlers in winter, for example. So Rudolph's a girl.
Right.
That's an interesting. It's an interesting thought, but who? I mean, while we can sit here and chuckle about that and go, so if it was scientifically possible, Jesus would be a girl. Well, but that's not going to do anything for a theist or a Christian or anything, because they don't believe it was parthenogenesis; they believe it was God. So, again, it's a nice mental exercise and a little bit funny. But I'm wondering why, like, what utility would we get out of that argument, or is it just for fun?
Yeah. No, correct. So, Richard, the point here is then if let us say you take any Christian, right, today, or any person of any faith, let's say Christianity, And to a Christian, you somehow demonstrated scientifically that a miracle was indeed happened, right? Scientifically. And they're going to swear by that, by the fact that, oh, look, science has proven that this is true and real, right? And so they will bank on science, and that's where they'll probably even give up God for that particular instance if they see God did it, and it is proven by science. So they won't rely purely on God. So in this case, you get my point that scientifically speaking, right, if Mary, Mother Mary, did reproduce asexually, then her child has got to be female. And what that also implies is that we've been taken in for a couple of thousand years, right? And people better pay some respect and then start referring to Jesus as a she. That probably will make more sense in my mind. I know there's a bit of a chuckle involved in that, but I think that would be a more sensible way of addressing the great Lord, isn't it? To say she was so and so and so and so. So rather than calling him a he, which is a little bit disrespectful, especially in this day and age of respecting pronouns and being able to understand the fact that people do have, several different genders, and we need to respect that. In this day and age, I think it becomes even more important that we.
Well, we can just add that to the massive pile of scientific inaccuracies that is the Bible. I mean, if the flood actually happened, then the crust of the planet would have melted just from the sheer weight of the water. So yeah, I mean, great. We'll add it to the pile. It is an interesting thought, but I mean, there's so many things in the Bible that if they were to happen within the laws of nature and science, would have catastrophic consequences or are literally impossible. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the problem with kind of going down this route. Although, yeah, technically we could say you're correct, but there's a couple of lines of argument that could be kind of put against that. One is that some people view Mary as being a virgin as a mistranslation anyway. So that's kind of one line of argument that people might go down. I'm doing a lot of steel manning of theist positions today. I don't know if people don't think I've gone to the other side. People could say that it's a mistranslation, but also if God is outside of space and time, and this is a conversation I've had with some other philosophers before as well, who've said that God is subject to the laws of logic. But if God is outside of space and time, because the laws of logic are only descriptive of reality, which are the kind of universe that we live in, if you like. If God is outside of that, then there's nothing to say that he is in fact subject to those things. And if he wants to interfere, if he is indeed all powerful and wants to interfere, then there's nothing to say that he couldn't just choose to do that. And his special God sperm, which entered Mary, might in fact be powerful enough to overcome this trans idea and make Jesus a man, like all good American Christians, and in fact an alpha man, and the alpha man and omega man. And, so there's a couple of ways we could kind of challenge this argument. Of course, as Jamie said, and I think this is the most important point, is that if we looked at, what happened in the Bible through a scientific lens, if we looked at all of it, a great deal of it would just simply be thrown out anyway. But again, this kind of, it's a great kind of thinking point. And I know Dr. Ben's touched on this before as well, that Jesus would, the trans Jesus thing. But I think it is just kind of an exercise in kind of thinking about things very deeply with no real, I don't think in a conversation with a Christian it would have any real kind of positive outcome. It wouldn't. I don't think it'd persuade anybody. I don't think anybody would hear this argument and think, oh yeah, that's actually correct. I'm no longer a Christian. I'd be very, very surprised. And while it is an interesting talking point, I think that's kind of where I'm interested in, is having those conversations about what people believe and why, and if there are good reasons to believe them. And for me, there's too many arguments from the other side that could take this one down a peg or two, if you like. So Nate, what do you think about that? Have you got any responses to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the argument you made was, one is to be able to take down this argument that I made, people will resort to magic. So that's the argument you made. With God being outside of nature and everything, it essentially is, in some sense, magic. Right? At least for the natural world, it is magic. So you're saying it is magic. The other thing you also said is that, what difference will it make to a Christian was the second big question, right? If you had this argument, and it won't make any difference because they're resorting to magic. But then the argument I also made is, let's say you did demonstrate to a Christian somehow that there was a scientific proof for something that is miraculous, right, that happened, then you can bet your life on that any Christian would take that and run with that, and say, look, science has proven that this thing actually happened, right? And they're going to hedge all their bets on science at that point. And the argument that I'm making is also very heavily predicated on science, and in fact, factual observations in the animal kingdom, right? And so it definitely would, I'm thinking, make a difference to the Christian. In the very least, it will at least offend some Christians, which will have them think, right? To say, oh, have we been thinking so wrongly about Jesus? I mean, Mary, there's no way Mary had sex. They absolutely agree that, right? Because that's what the doctrine says. So what's the only other way we know that people produce babies in the natural world? The only other way is to have progeny through parthenogenesis, right? Or the process is called parthenogenesis. And if she was the only documented case of it, which manifestly isn't true, I can cite 4 more instances of other scriptures and other faiths having virgin births. But let us say Christianity is the only true faith for a Christian. Then it should get them thinking. I don't see why it shouldn't. That's point A I'm making. And point B I'm making is, I'm thinking we should, as people who are agnostic. Now, you folks are in the business of thinking, right? And that's how I'd like to put you guys. I wouldn't like to label you as anything else, but the business you guys are in these kinds of shows you're in the business of thinking. You give some thought to these things. So if you are in that particular vein of activity, then I'm thinking one of the things we should also do is give the benefit of doubt and do refer to Jesus Christ as a they, maybe, right? At the very least, to say, well, it is possible that it is possible if it is true, because there's no way you can disprove it, right? Of course, you cannot disprove that Mary even did not exist, or Jesus did not exist, or you cannot. So you've got to give it some benefit of doubt and say, and weigh in on the side of science and use the term they, at least which gives a little bit of respect to the fact that Jesus probably was not male. Possible. It's true as we all are people from science, so we need to use that. So these are the 2 arguments I wanted to really make at bottom, and that's how I would respond to your question, Richard and Jay.
I think one of the difficulties with this is that I don't think going down the scientific route would convince Christians. And I've been through the miracle claims in some details in debates and things I've had with Christians before, And, I can broadly split miracle claims in the Bible into 3 different categories. And they are those which are replicable by other means, like Jesus walking on the water, changing water into wine, healing the sick, or talking donkeys. It's things that magicians can do. So these are replicable by other means. Things which are exceptionally unlikely, like Abraham and Sarah conceiving Isaac in old age, and Daniel not being killed in the lion's den. These are things that could happen. And then there's then those which appear to contradict the laws of nature or the laws of logic, such as people actually coming back from brain death, from actual death. And I think in all of these cases, in the first 2, people aren't going to be convinced by them. I'm not, like I say, I know this because I've actually had these conversations before. In the case of the third one, they have a really, really simple answer, and it's that God can do anything he wants because he's outside of the universe. He's outside of his creation. So he can, in fact, do whatever he wants. And he could do it in such a way that we wouldn't know the difference. And it's, like I say, it's a great talking point. It's a great thing to think about, but I don't think it's something that is convincing. I don't think it's something that would convince Christians. And that's the point I'm stuck on it.
And at the risk of sounding, again, this is going to sound really, really bad, but disputing Christ's gender, I think, is less important than disputing their divinity. Like, they're supposed to be the child of God, and then this is the whole point. And if you're saying, but that it's not the son of God, it's the daughter of God. It's still a person who's claimed to be able to resurrect from the dead, heal the sick. These things that are actually impossible. So, I'd rather use science to refute claims rather than to continue to pick holes. Because whether Jesus was a guy or a girl isn't as germane as whether Jesus could come back from the dead, at least in terms of the doctrine, basically. Because you could always make the argument like, okay, I accept that Jesus was a girl, but was referred to and brought up as a boy because of cultural reasons. They couldn't refer to the Messiah as a girl because girls were not treated well back then. And so even a liberal Christian would just explain it away and still say, but she still came back from the dead though because God. So I mean, it's an interesting point. It's a fair point, but I don't. There are sharper weapons in our arsenal, so to speak, in terms of the scientific refutation of the scripture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So are you? Let me ask you a question. That's very nicely put. I really appreciate the way you're explaining this to me. Let me ask you a question. So, is your objective to convert Christians out of Christianity? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want you to tell me what is the objective.
Well, my objective. And again, I don't speak for all the ACA. I don't speak for Richard. I don't speak for anyone but myself. But my objective is to encourage people in general to embrace skepticism, rational thinking, and logic. And if they do that, deconversion, deconstruction is just the next logical step. Like, I don't need to argue the irrationalities in the Bible. I just have to get them thinking in the way that they will find those things themselves.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with that. And
go ahead.
I agree with Jamie, and I think and in addition to that, we're not always arguing for the people we're kind of arguing against on the call either. Sometimes we get really way out there calls, and sometimes it benefits people who are on the fence or just curious about what atheism is or questioning the religion. Sometimes it benefits those people who are listening to the call. And that's, sometimes we get a lot of criticism for taking certain callers time after time who have really bad takes. And, but I think it's really, really important to understand that, we're not just talking to those people, we're talking to the thousands of people who are watching the show as well. And that's really, really important. That there are people out there. There might be people out there who are questioning their faith, and they get a really bad argument, such as the 7-day week proves Christianity.
As soon as you said we get weird callers, Mr. Delicious Chef Man.
And sometimes if a Christian is listening to those calls, that might get their brain thinking, do I sound like this? Do I really sound like this? But I agree with Jamie. My goal isn't to deconvert anyone. I just want people to think better. That's it. I want people to kind of go through their process of thinking. In the pre-show TikTok that I do on a weekly basis before this show, I had someone putting comments in that this week saying, well, the proof that God is real is that people died for what they believed in. And, the very, very easiest response to that is, well, Muslims have died for what they believe in. Buddhists have died for what they believe in. Hindus have died for what they believe in. People who have no religion, who are secular, have died for what they believe in. So by the methodology that you are employing, you are actually believing something for bad reasons, which evidences contradictory claims to your own. And it's these kinds of conversations these are the reasons we're having these conversations, to get people to think better, to go through why they're thinking a certain way and why they believe in what they do. And it doesn't, for me, it doesn't matter. I meet a lot of religious people through my degrees in religion, philosophy, and ethics. So I work with a lot of religious people at that level, and I don't sit there saying to them all the time, well, I want to deconvert you, you're wrong. Sometimes we're working together on projects and stuff, and we're looking at, specific questions. And that's really, really important, not to kind of, if you come out just clearly out of the gates attacking people and with the intention of saying you're wrong, you're stupid for believing what you do, then nobody's ever going to have a conversation, and nor should they. Because that's a really shitty attitude to have towards people. Let's have conversations, and indeed we can work through whether we think somebody is employing good logic or good standards of evidence and all that stuff. We can work through that together with a good conversation with someone, a polite conversation. We don't have to get nasty and start shouting at each other and saying, you are wrong and you're an idiot for believing what you do. It's unnecessary to do that. We can just have a good, solid conversation with somebody, good-natured conversation with someone, and, get them thinking through the methodology of how they are coming to the beliefs that they hold. And that is far, far more important than trying to get somebody to say, you know what, I'm no longer a Christian.
Yeah,
for me.
God's not our enemy. God's not real. Our enemy is hypocrisy. Our enemy is cognitive dissonance. Our enemy is irrationality. That's what we're fighting, and just religion and faith is the biggest cesspool of that kind of stuff, and that's why we're atheists and why we're counter apologetics activists, because that's where those things fester. Yeah,
that's awesome. That really is awesome, and that's great. Just one quick point is the point I made. Was essentially, I think, very much in lines of what you, Jamie, or Richard said, is you want to get people to be skeptical, right? And people to try and think rationally. And those are the things that those are, in fact, I think you're taking it so much better than I did, but that's what I want people thinking, right? Taking the example of this parthenogenesis with Mary, it's about being skeptical. It's about also thinking rationally to say if that happened, then what. But then, I do get your point. And thanks for taking the time, right, to explain it to me so nicely. I did have just one quick point I wanted to run by you, especially you folks, especially in terms of validating the veracity of how I'm thinking. Okay, if that's okay. So if I'm not hogging airtime, right? If you've got other more interesting calls, by all means.
No, go ahead. Go on.
Go to the next one. Yeah. Thank you. So, so if you talk about, a lot of people come to the argument of a deist God, right? By definition, is it then fair to say that by definition, a deist God would be one, regardless of how atheistic you are, right? And what slant of atheism or whatever that, and I don't label myself anything per se, but you have to be, you don't have a choice but to be exactly as skeptical of a God, a deist God, right? Existing as he is, or it is, or she is not, right? Because you cannot, by definition, that God will never give you an opportunity to make an assessment, unlike a theist God who will intervene, and so you have a chance to assess whether or not it's real. But then a deist God, you have absolutely no way of being able to ascertain either way. And so your position has to be, I'm exactly as sure that there is one as I'm sure there isn't. So that you're purely 50%. Is that a good way of thinking of it?
Jamie's chomping at the bit. I was going to respond, but I can see.
Yeah, I'm like, a deist God, a God that has no interaction with this universe. I'm not going to even think about it, because what's the point? They may as well not exist. If a deist God does exist, it literally doesn't matter, because they have no interaction with anything that I can perceive, so they may as well not exist. I don't care. If you believe in a deist God, cool, but you may as well not, because they may as well not exist. And that's where I stand on deist gods. How about you, Rich?
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's a 50-50 proposition. I think you'd have to kind of demonstrate the possibility of a deist God before you even got to assessing probabilities of a deist God. So, is a deist God even possible? And that's really, really hard to answer when, for all intents and purposes, it's indistinguishable from what we just call reality. And when we're just replacing one word with another, then there's no reason whatsoever to think that thing is even possible. So I don't think it's a 50-50 proposition at all. I think you'd have to demonstrate the possibility of a deist God before we even started talking about probability of that deist God existing.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you in that that the deist God doesn't participate, and so there's no point in even talking about it. But look at it this way: there's so many things even in the real world where you cannot actually evaluate it. For example, the case of string theory. Now, I'm not a physicist or anything. Maybe one of you are, but the string theory, as far as I know, there is no conceivable way of being able to even test it. Right? So it becomes an exercise. A mental exercise in mathematics when it comes to string theory. And so similarly, thinking about a deist God is simply a mental exercise, right? Whether the God has an impact or not, no, it does not. By definition, it does not, right? But then just logic, J-Mike kind of thing. We were talking about J-Mike in the previous call, or J-Mike kind of logic. If you want to think about it, you have no choice, in my opinion, but to sit right in the middle and say, I just don't know, so I cannot weigh in on either side of the agnostic scale when it comes to deist God. That's how I'm thinking of it.
I can see that. I can see there's no way that I can know. And I am an agnostic atheist. Like, I can't know whether there's actually a God. It's just that I have to go on evidence. And since a deist God cannot, by definition, produce evidence or be evidenced, then I don't feel like I should dedicate any brain cycles to that concept. Like, you can't prove it's real. I can't prove it's not real. It doesn't have any effect on the universe. Mental exercise over. Like, I've got better gods to fry.
Yeah, but then why should scientists think about things like string theory, or
because they observe things in the universe that there is causality, like the Higgs boson and stuff like that. or dark matter, or any of these things that are theorized but not proven, it's like, well, the math tells us that this is happening. There is inference around it, but there's no math telling us that there is an unprovable God. There's no inference of a deistic God. There's no gap to fill. It's like, so they theorize that because we observe these things in the natural world, because we observe that like there must be this much energy in the universe, there must be this much matter in the universe. Why can't we see all of it? Well, it must be dark matter then. Can we prove it? Haven't yet. Can we sample it? Haven't yet. But all that we understand about the world that we can prove and can measure and can evidence leads us to this conclusion. It's not just a thought experiment. It's a it's a logical thing. So I wouldn't equate them. Like belief, or at least entertaining a deistic God, is not the same as entertaining the idea of dark matter or string theory or anything like that.
Yeah, no, dark matter is, I think, with due respect, Jamie, I think it's not the best analogy, because dark matter does have it has gravity, right? We know that, and so it's measurable. We only don't know how to figure out what kind of a particle or field it is. That's what I.
Well, look, I'm not a physicist. I did computer science.
Yeah. I won't go deeper. I'm not either. I'm just a general science enthusiast. But the string theory, as far as I know, is I think it's a good analogy, because the string theories themselves agreed and accept that there isn't a way of even testing this. This purely is an exercise on paper. Maybe in the future, there could be ways of being able to actually test it by observation or whatever, or setting up a laboratory experiment or something. But today, there's no conceivable way. It's purely a mental exercise, and they're happy because it gives them predictable results and so on and so forth, right? And it's also beautiful. I don't know what it means for a mathematician to call something beautiful. They call it beautiful and all that, right? So, I was just drawing a connection between a mental exercise of a deist God. Now, I don't know if there is a deist God. I don't know if there is one. I'll never know.
I think a very simple way of looking at this, and I think a very simple way of looking at this, and I kind of agree with you, Nate. I don't think that was an exact analogy that Jamie came up with, because we do have evidence of something, and dark matter is the placeholder name we give to it. But I think a very simple way of looking at this is, do we have a good reason to believe in a deistic God? And the answer to that is no. We do not have a good reason to believe in a deistic God. So why even consider until we do have a good reason? And let's use dark matter as the kind of as a comparison here. Like I said, we can observe things happening that we give this placeholder name to, dark matter. When we have things happening which demonstrate that we need further into investigation into something that we give the placeholder name a deist God to, then that is the time to start seriously considering that as a concept. But until that time, as Jamie says, there's literally no reason to even think about it. It's just a kind of mental masturbation exercise. It was great 2,500 years ago when people were knocking ideas of gods about left, right, and center to see if this one was more likely than that. But we've moved on from them, people. We don't have to do that anymore. We know, there's no reason to think that Plato's perfect world of perfect circles exists. We've gone a little bit beyond that. So let's move beyond that and let's put those childish ideas aside. They're for the children of the human race, and we've grown up a little bit since then. So, let's move on from that. And when good reason comes along to start thinking about it, then think about it. Then let's think about it and go further into it. Nate, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for your call.